My name is Samantha Hayes, and I am 27 years old. If you asked me to describe my life, I wouldn't hand you a resume or list of achievements. I'd give you a song, slow aching, with sudden bursts of light, the kind of melody only I seem to understand. I live in Portland, Oregon, where rain falls almost every day, where the air smells of coffee-wet pine and unspoken dreams. My world is small, a one-bedroom apartment above a bookstore, a guitar leaning in the corner sheet, music scattered across the kitchen table. My family calls me a dreamer, but they don't mean it kindly. My sister Victoria is a lawyer in Seattle. My brother Ethan writes code in Silicon Valley. My parents beam with pride whenever their names come up. And me, I write songs no one in my family listens to, except for two people, my grandparents, Thomas and Margaret. I grew up in a modest two-story house on Portland's rainy side blue paint, chipped on the porch blackberry bushes tangling the backyard. My fondest memories are of sitting beneath the old cedar tree, listening to my grandfather's trumpet drifting from the window. He wasn't famous, just a man who once played in smoky Chicago jazz bars before settling down with my grandmother, a retired nurse who always smelled faintly of lavender soap. They weren't flashy people, but they had a quiet magic. When I was 8, I scribbled a clumsy melody on the back of my math homework. Grandpa studied it like a treasure map and told me, music isn't just something you hear, it's something you carry. And if you keep it close, it'll carry you right back. My parents never understood that. Dad managed a lumber supply company. Mom taught chemistry at the local high school. For them, success was measured in degrees, salaries, and promotions, not melodies that no one had asked for. Victoria was the golden child debate champion straight-A student destined for law. Ethan was the prodigy writing apps before puberty, pulling internships before college. And then there was me, the creative one, a label spoken with a sigh at the dinner table. While Victoria dazzled with courtroom victories and Ethan dissected algorithms, I would mention a song inspired by the rain against my window. The silence afterward was worse than criticism. Sometimes Dad would mutter, "That's nice, Sam, but what about your grades?" Other times Mom pressed her lips tight as if resisting the question, "When will you get serious?" I don't doubt they loved me, but they never believed music could be more than a phase. Only my grandparents saw me differently. Weekends with them were my refuge, turntables spinning Ella Fitzgerald, and Miles Davis Grandpa teaching me to hear the spaces between the notes. Those nights became my real education, not scales or theory, but permission to dream in a family that lived by straight lines and hard rules. By the time I turned 18, the pressure to conform buzzed around me like fluorescent lights. College brochures stacked up on the kitchen counter, engineering programs, business schools, even a pre-law packet Victoria mailed just in case. I smiled, nodded, and shoved them in a drawer. I had already chosen. Music was not simply what I loved. It was the only thing that made sense. My notebooks filled with verses and chords. My fingers grew calloused from midnight writing sessions. Some mornings, I woke with melodies still echoing as if they had been waiting in my dreams. The breaking point came one Sunday morning over pancakes. My parents were unusually cheerful, Victoria visiting from Seattle, Ethan glued to his laptop. I took a breath and said, "I'm not going to college." The room froze. Dad lowered his coffee mug. "What I'm going to focus on music. I'll work part-time to pay rent, but I'm not applying to schools." My voice shook, but I held my ground. Mom blinked twice. "Samantha, be serious. You can't make a living writing songs in your bedroom? You need a degree." Victoria crossed her arms. "I've seen people chase art and end up broke living with their parents at 30. You're too smart to throw your future away." Dad's voice rose. "If you skip college, you're making the worst mistake of your life. And if you think you can live here while you figure it out, think again. This isn't a free ride." That was the line in the sand. 2 weeks later, I packed my guitar, a duffel bag of clothes, and $380 saved from babysitting and farmers market shifts. I rented a studio above a downtown bookstore, its heater rattling its view just a brick wall, but it was mine. By day, I waited tables at a cafe. By night, I wrote until my fingers cramped. There was no applause, no contracts, just me and the songs. And for the first time, even with all the uncertainty, I felt free. The first years blurred into exhaustion and instant noodles. Rent devoured my cafe wages. The rest went to guitar strings, secondhand recording gear, and cheap groceries. Mom called often, asking if I was eating, urging me to take classes. Dad called briefly, "Find a real job yet?" Even Ethan texted once, "You're smart enough to do something else." Only my grandparents stood firm. Grandpa's voice crackled over the phone. "You're on the right road, Sam. Roads like this are never paved." Grandma mailed cookies and $20 bills hidden in paperbacks. Their belief became the only shelter I had. Then one cold January night, everything changed. My phone buzzed as I trudged home from the cafe, breath clouding the icy air. It was Grandma. Her voice trembled. "Sam, it's your grandpa. He had a heart attack. They're taking him to St. Mary's." I ran. By the time I reached the hospital, Grandma sat alone in the waiting room, eyes red. The doctor's words were merciless. He hadn't made it. At the funeral, I strummed a hymn, my hands trembling so badly, I nearly dropped the pick. That night, back in my apartment, grief poured through my pen. I wrote a song, every memory of Grandpa woven into melody, the sound of his trumpet on rainy nights, the warmth of his laugh, the smell of his aftershave. I called it Trumpet in the Rain. I posted a rough recording online expecting nothing, but within a week, my inbox exploded. Musicians I had never met wanted to collaborate. An indie singer from Seattle asked to record Trumpet in the Rain. I agreed, thinking it would be a small release. But when her album came out, something extraordinary happened. People listened. Strangers sang my words back to me. My little song, written in grief on the floor of my apartment, spread further than I ever dreamed. The first time I heard it out in the world, I was wiping tables at the cafe. A customer's phone rang, and my song played faintly from their ringtone. My heart stopped, the plate frozen in my hand. That moment was surreal. The world was humming with something I had created. Within a month, a small record label reached out. They asked if I could write for one of their new artists. The pay was more than 2 months of cafe wages. I said yes. 3 sleepless nights later, I delivered the track. It quietly racked up hundreds of thousands of streams. And just like that, the doors flew open. My inbox turned into a patchwork of accents and time zones, bands in Austin folk duos, in Denver pop singers in Los Angeles. They didn't want Samantha Hayes. They wanted Rain Miller, the pseudonym I'd chosen as a quiet tribute to Grandpa and that first song. At first, it was fear that made me hide behind the name. I didn't want my family to find out, only to dismiss it as luck. Later, the pseudonym became my shield. It kept my work safe from their disapproval. I taught myself contracts through YouTube tutorials. I learned negotiation through trial and error. Slowly, I built a network of producers, session musicians, even a lawyer I paid per email. My worth stopped being measured in tips. It was measured in royalties. By my 3rd year, my bank account crossed into 6 figures. By year 5, I had made more than $25 million. I upgraded my guitar, my recording setup, my apartment, but only slightly. Still, 1 bedroom still above the bookstore. If my parents ever visited, I wanted it to look like I was just scraping by. The only person who knew the truth was Grandma. I visited her every week with vinyl records and blueberry scones. She'd sit in her rocking chair, eyes shining as jazz filled the room. "You've done it, Sam," she said once. "Your grandpa would be proud." But time has its own sharp edges. Slowly, I noticed changes. She forgot which record was playing. She asked me the same question 3 times in an hour. The day she called me Margaret, her own name, I knew something was wrong. The diagnosis came a month later, early-stage Alzheimer's. That night, I sat at my desk, the city lights blurring through my tears, and I made myself a promise. Grandma would not fade away in some sterile room surrounded by strangers. She deserved music warmth and dignity, the kind of life she and Grandpa had once given me. I didn't know how yet, but I knew it had to be big. The idea came while I was listening to Kind of Blue in the dark. I thought of Grandma in her little house with steep stairs and an empty kitchen. She was already forgetting to turn off the oven. I saw what was coming if I did nothing. So I began searching. I asked my assistant and confidant Claire to look for properties outside the city. It had to be safe, filled with light gardens and space that felt like home. After weeks of walking through overpriced shells, we found it. A weathered 3-story estate in West Lynn, built in the 1920s. Its red tile roof and creamy stucco walls gleamed even through the neglect. The garden overflowed with roses and towering maples. It needed love, but I saw the finished picture, a music room with a grand piano, a lounge lined with Grandpa's records, a patio where Grandma could sip tea. I bought it outright. No loans, no hesitation. The renovations consumed me. I hired architects who understood historic homes, designers who knew how to blend beauty with practicality. We built an elevator so Grandma wouldn't need stairs. Her bedroom looked out over the garden with a quilted reading chair and shelves of her favorite novels, even if she might forget she'd read them. Every detail was a thread of love, but one idea wouldn't leave me alone. On my 22nd birthday, I had splurged on a helicopter ride over the Columbia River Gorge. The view had stunned me, the glassy water, the mountains rising like guardians, the clouds spilling across the ridges. That flight had inspired a song that very night. If it had given me such clarity, maybe it could awaken something in Grandma, even for a moment. So I did it. I bought a sleek black Bell 407. I took lessons, but I always planned to fly with a professional pilot. This helicopter, like the house, became part of my secret plan. Not a word to my parents, not to Victoria, not to Ethan. They would never understand. They'd only see risk and waste. But when the time came, they would see everything. The call came on a Thursday evening as I was reviewing paint swatches for the music room. It was Mom, her voice clipped, controlled. "Sam, we need a family meeting this weekend. It's about your grandmother." My chest tightened. "What's going on? We'll talk in person." She hung up. That Saturday, I drove to Beaverton. Autumn pressed sharp against the window's damp air, thick with cedar and wet leaves. Inside the house, it was the same scene as always: Dad in his recliner with the newspaper, Victoria Sharp in her tailored blazer, Ethan scrolling on his phone. Grandma sat quietly in the corner, hands folded, staring at the carpet. Small talk faded quickly. Mom cleared her throat. "It's about Grandma. Her memory is slipping faster. Last week, she left the stove on all night. We can't risk her living alone anymore." I nodded slowly. I agree. She shouldn't be alone, which is why. Dad cut me off. "We found a nursing home in Hillsborough. Clean, modern, affordable. We'll split the cost." Victoria nodded without hesitation. "It's the best option. I don't have time to keep driving from Seattle." Ethan didn't even look up from his phone. Not practical for me either. They talked like Grandma wasn't sitting right there. She stared at the carpet, knuckles white. I took a breath. She doesn't want a nursing home. She wants family. I can take care of her. Dad gave a humorless laugh. You can barely take care of yourself." "How would you pay for it with tips from the cafe?" Victoria smirked. "This is serious, Sam. You can't just play guitar at her bedside and call it care." Ethan's tone was flat. "We know you love her, but let's be realistic." Mom sighed. "It's a burden, sweetheart. Professionals know how to handle it. Their words weren't just dismissals. They were echoes of every time they told me I wasn't enough. I glanced at Grandma, and for a flicker, she met my eyes. Recognition. I stood, heart pounding. You can do what you want, but I'm taking care of her. My way. Dad rolled his eyes. Don't make promises you can't keep. But this time, I wasn't bluffing. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to Claire's number, and pressed call. My voice was steady, though my pulse raced. Claire, get the helicopter ready. Bring it to the field near my parents' house. The room went silent. Then laughter. They thought I had finally snapped. Victoria shook her head, smirking. Dad muttered something under his breath. Mom rubbed her temples. Ethan didn't even look up, just gave a quiet scoff. Let them laugh. In a few minutes, they wouldn't be laughing anymore. I walked out into the October wind sharp enough to sting my cheeks. My jacket pockets were heavy with my fists as I crossed to the field 3 blocks away, a worn patch of grass where kids played soccer in the summer. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from the cold, but from what was about to happen. Claire had said 20 minutes. Back at the house, I could see them through the window, leaning toward each other, no doubt tearing my grand plan apart. That was fine. I wasn't here to convince them with words. The sound came first low and distant like a drum roll. Then it grew louder, shaking the air around me. Heads turned all along the street as a sleek black Bell 407 appeared over the tree-lined sunlight glinting off its polished frame. My pulse spiked. Leaves whipped into golden spirals as the helicopter descended its rotor wash, rattling windows and scattering children who ran toward it cheering. The skids touched down controlled thunder filling the neighborhood. My family spilled out of the house, drawn by the noise. Dad's jaw tightened. What the hell is this? Mom clutched her sweater eyes wide. Victoria stopped mid-step, her phone slipping from her hand. Ethan froze on the sidewalk, earbuds dangling. I walked straight past them into the house and found Grandma in her armchair dozing. I knelt beside her and whispered, "Grandma, it's Sam. We're going for a little ride." Her eyelids fluttered open. "In the car." "Better," I said softly. The nurse I had hired weeks ago, without telling anyone, appeared at the door. Together we guided Grandma outside. Her lips parted when she saw the helicopter. Oh my. Thomas would have loved this. I know I whispered, my throat tight. We settled her inside with her headset on, hands folded gently in her lap. I turned to my parents. "You're coming too. Victoria, Ethan, follow us in the car. I'll text you the address." Curiosity overpowered their pride. Mom and Dad climbed in, still bristling, but unwilling to stay behind. The door thudded shut. The rotors accelerated, and then we were rising. The field shrank beneath us, houses becoming tiny squares. Grandma gasped softly, pointing to the silver snake of the Willamette River. "It's beautiful, Sam." I glanced at my parents. Mom's knuckles were white on the seatbelt. Dad's eyes flicked to me, still trying to understand what game I was playing. "Where are we going?" he demanded over the headset. "You'll see." We flew south, forests blazing with autumn colors unfurling below. Grandma's face lit with wonder. For a moment, she seemed younger, her eyes clearer, her smile unburdened. 20 minutes later, we banked east. The estate came into view. The renovated mansion gleamed cream against deep green gardens. The red-tiled roof glowed in the sun. Maple trees lined the driveway, swaying as if to welcome us home. We touched down on the helipad I had built in the backyard. The sudden quiet after the engine cut off was almost holy. Moments later, Victoria's spotless Tesla rolled up, Ethan trailing behind. They stepped out, staring at the house as if it had fallen from the sky. "Whose place is this?" Victoria demanded, her voice sharp. I didn't answer. Instead, I helped Grandma out of the helicopter and led her along the garden path, roses planted to match the ones from her old house. She stopped, closed her eyes, and inhaled deeply. It smells like home. Inside, polished wood gleamed beneath a chandelier's glow. And in the living room, waiting on a walnut stand, was Grandpa's trumpet. Grandma's hands trembled as she reached for it. Thomas's. I nodded. This is your home now, Grandma. Ours. The silence that followed was thick. Dad's voice finally broke it low and weary. Sam, what is this? How could you? I turned to face them all. For the past 6 years, I've been writing music under the name Rain Miller. Trumpet in the Rain, that was mine. So were dozens of other songs you've heard on the radio and commercials and movies. I've earned over $25 million in royalties and investments. I bought this house, the helicopter, the staff, all for Grandma. Their faces froze. Shock. Disbelief. Something else I couldn't name. Mom covered her mouth, tears in her eyes. Sam, why didn't you tell us? Because you never believed I could do it. I wanted you to see it, not hear about it. Dad rubbed the back of his neck. I was wrong. About everything. For once, Victoria had no comeback. She whispered, You wrote Trumpet in the Rain. Sam, it's beautiful. Ethan's eyes were wet. I've been writing songs too, he confessed softly. I just never told anyone. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Then maybe it's time you did. Grandma's voice broke through, quiet but steady. Sam, you remind me so much of your grandfather. In that moment, I knew every sleepless night, every doubt and sacrifice had been worth it. The days after the reveal felt like slipping into a new rhythm, one I hadn't realized I'd been writing all along. Grandma settled into her new home as though it had always been hers. The mornings were slow and tender. Tea on the patio, sunlight pooling across her quilt, the faint sound of jazz drifting from the music room. Some days she remembered every note of her favorite songs, humming along to Ella Fitzgerald, with eyes shining. Other days, confusion clouded her gaze, but whenever I played Trumpet in the Rain, her face lit up. The melody became a lifeline, pulling her back to me even for just a moment. My parents visited more often now. At first, their visits were cautious, guilt-ridden, as if they were offering penance. They brought flowers, pastries, polite apologies, hidden behind small talk. But slowly, the visits began to shift. Dad started sitting in the lounge, leafing through Grandpa's vinyl collection, asking hesitant questions about my songwriting process. Mom joined me in the kitchen, chopping vegetables while I worked through melodies at the counter, her eyes soft, where once they had been skeptical. It was as if the walls between us, built over years of misunderstanding, were crumbling piece by piece. The biggest surprise came from Victoria. Still sharp, still precise, she began to ask about balance, how I managed the endless pull between work and life, between ambition and peace. One evening, she admitted something I had never expected. I was jealous, Sam, she said quietly, staring at the garden. You had the courage to chase your dream. I've spent my life chasing expectations. For the first time, I didn't see her as the golden child or the rival. I saw her as my sister, flawed and human, just like me. Ethan changed too. On his second visit, he arrived carrying a guitar, looking sheepish. I've been working on something, he murmured, almost embarrassed. He played a few riffs, awkward but sincere, and I recognized the spark in his eyes, the same fire that had once burned in mine when Grandpa told me music mattered. I didn't tell him, but I knew. He had it. Sundays became sacred. If the weather was kind, we took Grandma into the sky. The helicopter lifted us above the Willamette, the forests, the mountains already frosting with snow. Sometimes she spoke, pointing out rivers or peaks. Other times, she simply stared out the window, a small smile tugging at her lips. I like to think she was storing those moments somewhere deeper than memory. somewhere the illness couldn't touch. One evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat with Grandma in the music room. The chandelier spilled soft light over polished wood shadows, swaying with the rhythm of the trumpet solos spinning from the turntable. She reached for my hand, her grip weaker than it once was, but her voice steady. "Sam," she whispered, "you didn't just give me a house. You gave me my life back." Her words stayed with me long after I helped her to bed. Lying awake, I realized something I hadn't before. The house, the helicopter, the millions of dollars, those weren't the true gift. The gift was belief. The belief Grandpa had planted under that cedar tree when I was 8 years old, telling me that music wasn't just sound, but something you carried. The belief Grandma had shown every time she mailed cookies with a 20 tucked inside. And now, the belief I had in myself that my songs mattered even when the world said they didn't. In time, my family stopped visiting out of guilt and started visiting out of love. The house became a place where we gathered not to compare resumes, but to share music meals and memories. Dad grew softer sometimes, even tapping his foot to Ethan's guitar. Mom, once rigid with practicality, hummed along while washing dishes. Victoria allowed herself to laugh more to let the sharp edges of her ambition ease in the warmth of family. Ethan and I began writing together trading chords late into the night, discovering in each other the bond we'd almost missed. For me, the greatest joy was watching Grandma thrive even as the illness crept in. Some days were hard confusion, frustration moments when she forgot who I was. But then I'd strum the opening chords of Trumpet in the Rain, and her eyes would brighten her lips, forming the words she had never forgotten. In those moments, I saw not just my grandmother, but the legacy of love and music that had carried me through. Looking back, I understood that my story was never about proving my family wrong, though I had once thought it was. It wasn't about money or accolades or even the name Rain Miller. It was about keeping a promise to myself, to my grandparents, to the little girl who scribbled clumsy notes on the back of math homework. It was about ensuring that the people who gave me music and belief would leave this world surrounded by the same. One night, as I closed Grandma's bedroom door, I glanced at the trumpet gleaming in the corner. Its silent presence seemed to echo with every note Grandpa had ever played. And I knew without a shadow of doubt that the song wasn't over yet. If you've been moved by this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt journeys like this. And I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below.